My clock shows it's noon, so we're going to just get started. People will come in as we go forward here. For those of you who don't know who I am Dallin Brooks. I'm the new Executive Director of the National Hardwood Lumber Association. I hope you had a chance to come to the NHLA convention last week. It was a great meeting, and I think there was about 1,000 people there enjoying the opportunity to work together and learn about different issues as we go forward and the great things that the NHLA is doing. So thanks to all those who were there to support the convention last week. We also had some great fundraisers for the Real American Hardwood Coalition, ITSEF, which is the Inspector Training School Education Fund, and the North American Forest Foundation. So a lot of work put together by a number of companies, and that's really appreciated to help us continue to advocate and advance and promote and train those people in the industry and outside the industry on all things wood. It is my pleasure today to have a special webinar with the U.S. Forest Service and Patrick Rappold from the Forest Service. I knew Patrick years ago at the University of Arizona. We did some work together on small diameter round wood guardrail posts. And so we worked together on that. He had the best video presentation you've ever seen because it was cars crashing. It'll be very hard to top that, Patrick, because nobody's going to get to see the cars crashing anymore. But in 2019, Patrick left the University of Arizona and went over to the Forest Service, and he's here to talk about wood innovation grants and the whole program. There's several different opportunities for for-profit companies to get these. Again, there's lots of opportunities also for nonprofits to get these, and the NHLA is intending to work on finding the right partners and collaboration efforts so that we can apply for grants as well. I have received these grants before previously to come to the National Hardwood Lumber Association when I was with the Western Wood Preservers Institute. Again, we got a grant to study small diameter roundwood for fence posts, and it was a great opportunity. So I've got 2 grants from the Forest Service on that, wood innovation. And it's always wonderful when the Forest Service recognizes that sometimes the best innovation isn't the newest or the fanciest idea, but going back to some of your roots and some of the things that have worked forever, like roundwood posts, or in our case, lumber. So I'm going to turn the time over to Patrick. I think we've got most everybody in here. They've heard my diatribe. So Patrick, I'm going to stop sharing and let you take control.
Thank you for that introduction, and thanks for inviting me on to this webinar. I do apologize for missing your convention last week. Traveling is tough sometimes, and we are doing a lot of work at the Forest Service right now, so I wasn't able to attend, but maybe next year. And so I will be presenting on the Wood Innovations funding programs. And so there's 2 programs. And so this is for informational purposes. Our federal fiscal year begins on October 1st, 2022, which is a few days away. So some of this information today may change as we finalize federal fiscal year 23's funding programs. And so just take that into consideration that some of this content may change. And so I work with a great team of people across the United States and U.S. territories. And so essentially we have divided up the country and territories in different regions, and each region has their own point of contact for this particular grant programs. And so if you were applying from St. Paul, Minnesota, you would contact Lou McCreary, who is stationed in Morgantown, West Virginia. If you were to apply for these grant programs, say from Nashville, Tennessee, you would contact Marcus Taylor. My role in this program is sort of similar to an administrative assistant. I help with the outreach, I help with the delivery, and I also organize some of the national review process that we go through to award the projects. And so I will present this contact information again at the end of the presentation for you to take notes of the contact people. And I believe I also provided NHLA with a PDF copy of this presentation that they can distribute to members and participants. So the two programs that make up the Wood Innovations funding programs, there's a Wood Innovations funding opportunity and the Community Wood Grant Program. So the Wood Innovations funding opportunity, that started in 2015. And the number one objective of that program is to reduce hazardous fuels and improve forest health. And so there's a big component in there to helping reduce catastrophic wildfire and improve forest health. And so I'll get into how that applies to hardwood lumber and other businesses here in a little bit. The other program, the Community Wood Grant Program, that was first launched around 2020, fiscal year 2021. And so that is the much bigger program compared to Wood Innovations. The funding level is much higher, much greater. In the Community Wood Program, it's more designed for projects that are ready to go. And so I will give some examples of the projects we have funded in the past few years that are related to the hardwood lumber industry. And so these are the two grant programs I'll be speaking on. Applicants are encouraged to apply for one or both of these programs. Typically, the Wood Innovations Funding Program gets a lot more applicants. It's nationally competitive, very competitive, national in scope. Community Wood Grant Program, also very competitive, but maybe a few less applicants per year. And so that's only because the Community Wood Program, it's really designed for projects that can, get out and go and get stuff done. As to where the Wood Innovations funding opportunity, we do fund a lot of wood supply studies and other initial engineering supply studies that are needed to then create larger projects. So hazardous fuels. So this is an image of the aftermath of the 2011 wildfire. This is an image just near Alpine, Arizona. And so what you're seeing there is how the forest thinning activities helped reduce the intensity and severity of the fire as it came over that mountain. This particular wildfire was a wind-driven fire, and so it, instead of going up the mountain, it came over the mountain from the other side. And so this is essentially what these programs are designed to do. Essentially, we are creating markets, we are stimulating forest markets to encourage forest management. And so the forest management that occurred on this particular project, this was the White Mountain Stewardship Project. A logging contractor came in here, reduced the stand density of the small diameter ponderosa pine, the logs, the biomass, the slash that was produced from this thinning operation. They were all marketed to local businesses. At the time, there was 2 or 3 sawmills in this area buying the logs from this project. And all of the lower grade non-merchantable material went to a residential wood heating pellet manufacturer. And so this is what the Forest Service ideally wants to see in these projects, is that the funding supports forest management on the ground through economic, viable forest markets. And so this is a document that the USDA Forest Service put out in January of this year. And so this is the Confronting the Wildfire Crisis strategy. And so I present this information because if you do apply for these grants, you are competing nationally, and a overarching intent of these grants is for the reduction of catastrophic wildland fires. And so as we all know, typically most wildfires occur within the softwood forest ecosystems, and they typically don't occur to the same extreme and intensity in the hardwood forest system. However, in the hardwood forest system, there is a number of issues that the Forest Service would like to be partnering on with the private sector to address. One of them is invasive insects and disease. And so here you see the example of the emerald ash borer and the catastrophic impacts of the forest that particular insect has had on the Northeast and the Midwest. And so even though the hardwood forest sector doesn't have the wildland fires. It doesn't have the bark beetle issues. The Forest Service still sees a need to support the forest markets that can deal with the materials that need to be removed to improve forest health and to improve the vitality and health of the forest. Also, another common issue we like to address through these grant programs is supporting businesses that utilize the low grade, low value material that is either produced from the forest or produced as waste products from higher value manufacturing systems. And so in the Midwest, the Northeast, we've really seen a loss of the pulpwood markets. We've lost the industry. And so there's a real need to find a market for the small diameter pulpwood, pre-commercial thinning material that comes off our national forests, our private lands, and our state lands and tribal lands. And so, just trying to make the point that although the overarching purpose of these grants is hazardous fuels reduction, there is a place and opportunity for hardwood lumber manufacturers to apply for these grants. So eligibility is fairly broad for both programs. And I would say all of the businesses that I know that are part of NHLA are probably eligible to apply. If there is any question about eligibility, feel free to contact me or the regional Wood Innovations Coordinator. And again, I just want to stress that this information is from federal fiscal year 22, which ends in a couple of days here. So some of this information may change slightly in the new federal fiscal year. So here's the important topic of funding levels. And so in the announcement that NHLA sent out for this webinar, it did state that there was $5 million allowable for individual applicants. I think that was, I know that was a mistake. And so I just want to walk that statement back that, we can't award up to $5 million for individual applicants. With the Community Wood Grant Program, we can award up to $1 million, but we can't go above that level currently. I believe the error that occurred in the outreach notice for this webinar comes from the fact that we typically have about up to $5 million in available funding for the Wood Innovations funding opportunity. And so I do apologize for that mistake, but these are the current, or these are the federal fiscal year 22 funding levels that we can allocate individual awards at. We cannot currently award up to $5 million, but we anticipate we will have up to $5 million in funding to award in federal fiscal year 2023. And so with the Community Wood Grant, there is some stipulations that, we want our applicants to pay to, fund themselves a portion of the project cost. We're not going to fund the entire portion of the project cost for the Community Wood Program. We do require that some leverage, or we ask that some leverage is part of that program. And so on that topic, I'll go to this slide here, which talks about leverage and match requirements. So for the Wood Innovations funding opportunity, there is a match requirement. And so if you're not familiar with federal grants and the concept of match, essentially, if you are awarded a $10,000 grant, you have to produce either in cash or in kind a one-to-one match for that $10,000. And so most applicants do it through in-kind match. A great example is if you are having a project where you're swapping out your wood-fired boiler and you request funding from the Forest Service to purchase a new wood-fired boiler, then your match component could be the amount of money that you or your business put into the engineering, the retrofitting of that facility. And so I'll get into more about what we can fund and cannot fund in the next slide. The community wood grant program, so no formal match was required. However, we do look for leverage, and that leverage is, around 65%. The federal funds can only pay up to 35% of the total capital cost. However, if you work with your wood innovations coordinator and you have a low income area or high unemployment area, we can allow up to 50% of the total capital cost to be funded through the community wood grant program. And so I know some of this sounds confusing if you're new to federal grants, but again, contact me or contact your regional wood innovations coordinator with questions. Allowable use of Forest Service funds. And so let me start with the wood innovations funding opportunity. In federal fiscal year 2022, we did allow for the purchase of stationary wood to energy equipment. So a good example of that is wood-fired boilers, boilers that would heat dry kilns, boilers that would produce electricity. We do fund what they call combined heat and power units that are wood-fired. We cannot fund wood-fired. We cannot fund boiler systems that are propane powered or powered by heating oil. We can only fund wood-fired wood energy equipment. And so if you do fund your project and you purchase equipment, there is a federal interest in that equipment. I manage around 30 grant agreements. None of my grant agreements involve equipment, so I don't know what additional paperwork is involved in tracking that equipment, but I do know that there is a federal interest in that equipment until the equipment depreciates to $5,000 or less. And so we strongly encourage applicants to, not purchase equipment and instead use the federal funding to do engineering work, do permitting work, and similar activities like that. The one thing we cannot fund is we can't fund construction. And so if you are planning to swap out your wood-fired boiler system and you need to install a new building for the boiler, the Forest Service cannot fund the construction of that building. However, that the cost that you incur in putting that building up, that can be used as leverage or match. So now I'll switch to the community wood grant program in terms of allowable uses of the funding. So you can purchase a wider array of equipment through the community wood grant program. The main limitation on equipment is we cannot fund mobile equipment. So that's equipment such as log skidders, feller bunchers, forklifts, log loaders, anything that essentially has wheels or tracks, we prefer not to fund. However, we can fund a lease agreement if you need to lease a piece of equipment to complete your project. And we do allow for those lease agreements as long as they are not lease to own type contracts. And so it has to be a straight lease and not a lease to own type contract. So the next few slides, just some examples of how the program has been used in the past 3 years. I didn't go all the way back to 2015. I didn't want to put that much data out there. But again, if you do have questions about which projects we have funded in the past, we do have an online searchable database at the Forest Service Wood Innovations webpage. And I do have a link for that at the end of this presentation. So you can actually go in there, you can search for previously funded projects, you can do a keyword search, you can do a location search. So it's a very robust search engine that we have developed, and we do keep it updated. The fiscal year 22 data is not in the database yet, and I am working on updating it. So this is the hardwood related projects that were funded in fiscal year 2019. And so 2 research projects at Virginia Tech, and then 1 marketing association down in Georgia. And so we do fund a decent number of research projects with universities that do support advances in forest markets, new products. And so, I think in general, from what I've seen, the forest products industry does not invest a lot in research because it's very expensive. And so a lot of times the industry does rely on universities such as West Virginia University, Virginia Tech, Michigan Tech to do that fundamental research to develop new projects, new products, and help improve processes. So here are the 2 fiscal year 20 projects that were funded. Again, 2 important research related projects. And in terms of mass timber and hardwood lumber, that is something that we do get applicants every year trying to fund. We do fund some of those projects, and the whole application of hardwood lumber in mass timber panels, that might be a good follow-up webinar for this particular, for this group here. I am not a mass timber expert, but I can provide contact information for people at Virginia Tech or West Virginia University that are doing this research, and can provide you with the current results I have for the applications of hardwood lumber in mass timber panels. So fiscal year 21. So this was last year's fiscal year. And so we did fund a number of projects that went to private businesses. And so Kretz Lumber in northern Wisconsin, Heat and Power System, Thompson Hardwoods, another wood energy system. And then for the community wood program, that was a project in New Hampshire at a furniture manufacturer. Again, another wood energy project. And so I think what happened between this fiscal year and this fiscal year is that that lumber market really took off, and I think a lot of businesses really were seeking the financial assistance to expand operations, keep up with demand, keep up with the markets. And so I anticipate that this coming fiscal year we'll see additional lots of good applications from private industry to support these programs. So this is the current fiscal year, several research projects and several projects that did fund some private enterprise work. And so we had a project in upstate New York, a combined heat and power system, and then a wood energy system, biomass energy system in northern Wisconsin. And again, if you have any questions about what we funded in the past, there is that website that you can provide. You can search hardwood, you can search boiler systems, keyword searches. You can also search by location and federal fiscal year. Timeline. So again, this timeline is subject to change depending on actions taken in the current upcoming fiscal year. Typically, the Forest Service starts to accept proposals the 3rd week of October. The 3rd week of October is typically designated National Forest Products Week. So we like to be part of that messaging. And, that's when we kind of jumpstart this program, get it out there. We start accepting proposals. We encourage people to, if you're thinking about applying for a grant through this program, it's never too early to start. And, right now you can start talking to your Forest Service contacts. You can start putting some thoughts on paper about, what you want to fund, what activities you want to fund, but, it's never too early to start that process. And in years past, the deadline to submit an application has traditionally been late December, early January. And after that, we look at each proposal, we score it, we rank it. We have what we call a technical review committee, look over each proposal for technical merit. We also have a number of people from the Forest Service that manage national forests, look over them for, impact the national forest system. And so if the stars are aligned, we can typically announce the projects that are funded sometime in May. And then there is a process to finalize the grant agreements, and we typically strive to get those grant agreements finalized by September 31st to meet the end of the federal fiscal year. Again, I present this as what occurred in federal fiscal year 22, and federal fiscal year 23 may be slightly different. So just check the Wood Innovation website. If you have any questions, contact me or contact your regional Wood Innovations coordinator. So here are some tips that I have seen from applicants that have been successful over the years. The first one being work with the National Wood Energy Technical Assistance Team. That is a team that is funded by the Forest Service. I have contacts to get in touch with the person that manages that team. What that does is that provides you with a pre-feasibility study for your wood to energy application. So if you're thinking about upgrading your boiler, if you're thinking about getting a new boiler system, a new dry kiln system, that team will provide you with a very broad but concise pre-feasibility study to let you know, essentially from a very high level, what it's going to cost, and is it something that you want to move forward with based upon the information that you give to the team. Second thing I highly recommend is to work closely with your regional Wood Innovations coordinator. I know in the region I work in, Region 9, Lou McCreary, he will always read over the applicants. He will provide some guidance on, suggestions for improving your application. Third tip is propose activities that address solutions to forest health issues, or, solutions that reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire. You really have to think about how the project would impact your community as a whole, forestry as a whole, and not just your business. And so it's always going to tie in a larger reach, a larger purpose to your grant, to your project activities than simply just, improve manufacturing systems. The fourth tip is to work closely with forest supervisors, district rangers. If you're not near a national forest, if you don't procure timber from national forest, work closely with your state forester, your state utilization and marketing specialist. We like to see letters of support from state foresters, from other people that, are in your community that want to provide input to us that, will point us in the direction that your project will have a larger impact on the community than simply just, supporting one business. It will have a large impact on the community and the forestry community as a whole. If you do plan to apply for funding, you do have to be registered with the sam.gov system. So this is the system for award management. This is the method that the Forest Service will reimburse you with funding. And so these are reimbursable grants. And so essentially the way it works is that when you incur project costs, you can then request reimbursement for those costs through the Forest Service. And so the way that we allocate that funding, that those reimbursements, is through this sam.gov system. It does take some time to get registered with this system. So if you're planning to apply in the next fiscal year 23, I would encourage you to start the sam.gov registration system today, and don't wait until October, don't wait until March, or I'm sorry, don't wait until November. I would start that process right now because it does take a while to get that process finalized. Reporting requirements. So this can be a bit daunting at first. I do help out my grant agreements. I do help out my people that I have grant agreements with, the businesses. We do require annual reporting and financial reporting. Again, the first time you do it, it's very difficult. Lots of very specific Forest Service forms, but after your first time submitting, it's typically pretty easy, and people like myself can help you get those forms filled out on time and submitted. So these are the two national program managers. They are the ones that help myself and the regional wood innovations coordinators, implement the program. These are two individuals that, talk directly to the Forest Service chief, talk directly to your state foresters about, issues you see going on out there. And also here is the link to the Wood Innovations homepage. And then my information is down here in the corner. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions, and I can usually point you in the direction of a person that can answer it. So we're at the bottom of the hour right now. I have about 3 more bonus slides if I have time. So I'll just go through these fairly quickly. So I just wanted to highlight again.
Sorry, Patrick, you have time, and some people are asking for the contact information. So if you leave that slide up for a second, perfect.
Sure. So, yep. So if you're in Region 9, which is the Northeast and Midwest, that would be Lou McCreary. And if you're in the Southern region, that would be Marcus Taylor. And I did look at the membership page for the NHLA. I do see you have some members up there in the Pacific Northwest. And so that would be Jim Archuleta or Adrian Kaiser. And so I'm just going to move on, but I can come back to this in a few minutes. I just wanted to highlight the Wood Education Resource Center. So this is a Forest Service facility in Princeton, West Virginia. It's a physical facility. They do lease out space to a secondary manufacturer that operates a rough mill there. And so when we have discretionary funding for the Wood Education Resource Center, we can fund hardwood related projects that were not funded through the national program. And so I just wanted to point that out, that, there is sometimes discretionary funding available through the Wood Education Resource Center to fund projects that are not funded at the national level. And so this is the traditional scope of area for projects that we fund through the Wood Education Resource Center. We primarily look at the hardwood region, but we have funded some projects in the farther Midwest and the Northwest, but typically we try to focus on funding hardwood related projects. So the Wood Energy Technical Assistance Team, this is a team managed by Lou McCreary. Essentially, the Forest Service works with a private engineering firm, and they will provide you with a very high-level pre-feasibility study if you are considering upgrading your boiler system, moving to a new boiler system, or installing your first boiler system. And so with that, I will jump back to the contacts page. I'll leave it here, and I am open for questions, and I have not been monitoring the chat window, so I will peek over there quickly and see if there's anything I need to answer directly.
Some questions are going to come in the chat, Patrick, but let me start off and just add some and ask some questions back and forth as people enter in more chats, because there are a few questions that'll come up, and I think there's a few things that we need to highlight, because you talked about the importance of any application addressing forest health. You talked about underutilized wood species, but isn't there also a component that talks about the employment opportunities or other, you mentioned sort of getting letters from community leaders, but the community benefit of higher paying skilled positions and things like that?
Yes. So in particular, the community wood program does look at the unemployment rate in the community where the project will be implemented. And so we score that fairly highly in the consideration for that particular grant program. For the Wood Innovations funding opportunity, unemployment rates, income levels are also considered, but not at the same level as they're considered in the community wood program.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. I think that's important for everybody to hear. I think this is a great program. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate your guys' interest in addressing the hardwood industry. I can totally understand those forests burning in the Pacific Northwest and California, and we are blessed to have healthier forests in the hardwood forests, although we still have our issues, as you mentioned, the insects and other things like that. So there are still absolutely concerns for forest health issues pretty much in every state. And if there isn't, we can say that there will be, and so therefore we need to be preventative, right?
Correct. Yep. So, I'm thinking about the baseball bat manufacturers that are thinking of, switching from white ash to red oak. That's a pretty big change in species in terms of drying time, drying rates, and, just different machining. So that could be a potential project we could look at if someone, is interested in that particular type of manufacturing.
Correct. Okay, let me just ask a couple other questions that I sort of have off the top of my head before we get a couple of chat questions coming up. But before we get there, my appreciation and understanding of it in terms of underutilized wood species, and I think you've got a pretty good list, but let me just go over it. And if there's something you want to add to the list of underutilized wood species that often get and should be a focus of any grant if they can, would be tulip poplar, sweet gum, red maple, which is the soft maples, beech, birch, yellow paper birch, any of those birches, and box elder. Is that a pretty good list?
That's a pretty good list. For that particular question, I would, encourage the applicants to work with your local state foresters, your local foresters in your region that are on the ground doing that work, that need those markets for those particular species. I don't want to put any particular species in a box and, call it underutilized. That's where we really rely on our people on the ground, the foresters, your state foresters, your field foresters, people doing the work on the ground that need markets for those timber species they're trying to get rid of.
Sure, I can appreciate it. In fact, I think the whole industry at the conference made it pretty clear that 4-quarter red oak right now is completely underutilized. They would love to have some more. So, yes, thank you. And I agree with you. Let's just talk a little more second about the stationary wood equipment, because you mentioned boilers and systems for kilns. And I think the stationary wood equipment is one where there's going to be a lot of for-profit businesses, hardwood mills that are going to be interested in stationary wood equipment beyond just the wood boilers. And, especially with innovation coming, lack of labor. I know a number of people had issues, and we talked about labor issues within the supply chain and other things like that. And the stationary wood equipment and the opportunity for other types of things such as robotics, bin sorters, something where it is looking at saying, hey, we're a small company, we've had a hard time getting capital, but we really want to take some innovative equipment, process equipment, not necessarily product, again, it's still lumber, but looking at process equipment innovations to, again, build up their community, keep jobs in the community, higher paying jobs, all those things like that. What about the stationary equipment outside of the boiler side of things?
Sure. So the community wood program does allow for reimbursement of equipment other than wood to energy equipment. And so in the current fiscal year, we did award a project in, I believe it was Maine, to a white pine sawmill. They were looking to, or they are going to use the funding to put in a optimized edger system. And so the city, the rural area where the sawmill is located, it did have a very high unemployment rate, and it had a very low income level there for that community. And so, that's why that's one of the reasons it was funded, due to the high unemployment and, the low income levels for that particular region. So optimized edgers have been funded in the past. I believe 2 years ago, there was a log merchandising system funded in northern Idaho. And so, essentially the sawmill was bringing in whole tree length logs, and they needed funding to put in a log merchandising system. So scan the logs and then merchandise the logs into appropriate lengths. So that's two examples of other equipment other than wood energy equipment that has been funded in the past through the community wood program.
Thanks. And, again, that's really the key thing, Patrick, that we really want to focus in on is we want to keep hardwood logs in North America, right? And it ties in with our Real American Hardwood Coalition promoting North American and doing that. And so if we have those types of stories, I think that's very accurate for what we're looking at for these. The other tie-in I would say about the stationary equipment was the comment you made about the construction of buildings and the funding of equipment and the requirements for having to track those assets as they depreciate. And I just want to clarify and make sure I have this right, which is ideally the Forest Service does not fund the actual equipment purchases, but can use the funds for funding the engineering, some of the installation, the permitting, other things around the equipment purchases, and the building, if there's any building requirements, can go towards the match, but it's not part of the funding from the Forest Service, correct?
Yes, you are correct. We can fund equipment. We prefer not to, just because it does create a federal interest. Essentially, it generates a lot of extra work tracking, not only for the Forest Service, but also for the private companies that have to report the value of the equipment and other items. So I mean, it's kind of a catch-22. It makes a big impact, but there is a lot of paperwork and additional monitoring that goes along with equipment. So
yeah, these guys have plenty of paperwork just for the IRS, so they don't want to create more for the for the Forest Service and the SAM.gov. I think they can all appreciate that and understand it. And I think the SAM.gov is also worth bringing up, which is it is a very intensive process. So if you're just sort of peripherally thinking about grants, I wouldn't get into filling it out yet. Like, I would probably develop your grant, have some conversations, make sure you're well into the process before you go and tackle that, because it is something that takes some extensive time. And if you need advice on stuff like that, we will be undertaking that at the NHLA, and there's other organizations such as Amy up at Keystone in Pennsylvania and others who have taken on those types of things. So there are other allied associations that have taken on some of those grants and can also give you advice on that. But there are a lot of for-profit people that want to charge to get in that. There's a lot of junk mail that comes with getting in the SAM.gov database because they just find you everywhere and trying to fish you out. So some thoughts on that. All right, I have a bunch of questions coming in. I did want to get through a couple more of my questions, but let's take a second and answer some of the members' questions. Bill Smith wants to know specific dates. If a project's already underway, can it be considered?
Yes. And so, the problem is that we cannot reimburse costs retroactively. You have to have a grant agreement in place for the project cost to be reimbursed. And so I would encourage the applicant to, think long-term. Is there something else that can be part of that project that's already active, but we can't reimburse retroactively. We can only reimburse for project costs after the final grant agreement has been executed.
Okay, so that means if you're applying for a grant and you're hoping it to happen in January, any costs you incur from the time you apply till January, not covered.
Correct.
So you gotta be willing to wait for these projects until you know if you got the grant or not.
Yes.
Okay. And then Bill also wanted to know about things being delayed, which I can speak to because our COVID delayed my grant. Definitely no issues. You just got to keep that communication going and to fill out the annual reports.
So typically we are allowed to extend the projects up to 5 years in length. If we need to go beyond 5 years for the project, there is a process to do that. I have done it once. I monitor each of my grant agreements. And so when we get towards the deadline, I do contact them to make sure they are good with finishing it. But so the answer is yes, we can go past 5 years, but there is some additional paperwork. It can be done, but typically I see most projects get done within about 3 years, even with the current supply chain issues.
Okay. Tammy from Mississippi State wants to know if they are interested in more low value hardwood CLT. And you sort of mentioned CLT, so I think you might have answered that already. Certainly it's one that's got your attention.
Yes, we did fund a project in Michigan Tech this year, looking at red maple applications to cross-laminated timber. So, if there is additional interest in that, work with your regional wood innovations coordinator to see, how that would fit within that particular grant program.
Okay. I got a follow-up about the sort of stationary equipment needs to keep you in business. And just wanting to know more about it. What would you say about stationary equipment, Patrick? Is it really a situation where you're going to have to tell a whole story? You're going to have to get there and talk about the forest and your supply. You're going to have to talk about your operations. You're going to have to talk about the community and the wood species. Like it's really about painting a complete picture.
Correct. We do have page limitations on the application. So, if you can succinctly identify how the equipment will increase your efficiencies, which will then benefit the forest and your community, that is the ideal situation. It is daunting to write a federal grant if it's your first time. There are people out there that you can pay to write grants. And I do see sometimes universities helping out private businesses with grant applications. I have seen cooperative extension personnel assist private businesses with the application process.
And if that doesn't answer your question, Jerry, the thing that I would add to that, Patrick, is that, NHLA is here to give letters of support. We know how to also have good academic partnerships so that, other people can get involved in a project. So if it is, hey, we want to do this, but we can also tie it into a study with, Mississippi State University or somebody, we can really help develop that project a little bit more to get more feedback to really address the issues. So again, this is a situation where there hasn't been a lot of different grants, but there are opportunities out there for the members, and they can take advantage of that if they really want to delve into it. And the NHLA, as well as the academics, are all, and the staff, as you mentioned, getting the staff involved early on and having them review it really will be helpful to get these kind of grants.
You are spot on correct.
Nate from the RTA wants to know if there's a lead person on pulpwood market issues at Forest Service. So off the topic question.
So I would contact your regional wood innovations coordinator within your region. So if you're in region 9, that would be Lou McCreary or myself. And, that person can then put you in touch with someone within their region at a higher level that, would be the pulpwood contact, maybe at a national forest system or, at a different level.
Okay. Here's a good one, talking about annual reporting to the government. You know what everybody loves to do? Stuff like report to the government, and they want to make sure that there's no reporting after the project is completed.
So I don't have any projects that involve equipment, but I believe, once your grant agreement expires, you submit a final report, and then that is it. I don't have the responsibility of tracking any equipment just because I don't have any agreements that track equipment, that have equipment. But, I think once the equipment depreciates below $5,000, it's no longer a federal interest. So there is no longer any tracking needed. But again, I haven't done that. I haven't tracked equipment. And so I really can't answer that question. But, essentially, if your grant agreement is done, you can stop reporting. So.
Yeah, that's my experience from the past as well, is that once it's done, you can stop reporting on that. And the critical thing for Rich and for anybody to know is that if you are going to fund equipment, then yes, you will have to do continual reporting to track that equipment until that depreciation value, which is why it's just encouraged not to apply for the actual equipment itself, to tie it into the engineering, the permitting, and everything else, installation, other costs associated with the equipment besides the actual physical equipment itself, which you need to use as a match anyways. So it really does fit in with that scenario. All right, next question I have here is from Bill Smith again. Processing and handling equipment can really help mill efficiency, and with that profitability, it also helps reduce lack of labor issues. But the company may actually have lower employment from automation or other things like that, equipment handling, resulting in a healthier business, which is good, but without increasing employment opportunities in the community. So how do you handle that paradox?
Sure. Well, I mean, if we fund an equipment purchase that keeps that company in business, and that's probably saving 200 jobs. And so, you're looking at the bigger picture, and then, the more advanced equipment, it does require maintenance, it does require upkeep. And so, there is some of that indirect jobs that are also created through these equipment purchases that, may reduce labor, but, overall, it will increase the efficiency of the sawmill and help that business stay in business, which we all want. We don't want to see businesses go out of business.
Thanks, Patrick. that's the last of the questions that I have in the chat box. So if anybody else wants to put in some questions, I'll go ahead and ask a couple of other questions, and we'll come back to the chat box in a minute. So we talked about automation and different things like that. And it is my mistake. I'm the one that put the $5 million in the outgoing email. So let's just clarify the value. So basically $250,000 up to 1 million, depending on the type of grant you apply for. Again, this is government funds that are being utilized that you're matching. So you would have to spend 250,000, get 250,000. So you're talking about a $500,000 project in total, up to that type of range, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure everybody's clear on that. The other thing that we have to talk about is where the forest wood and the wood comes from. So if you're utilizing, let's say you're an operation in Oregon or the Pacific Northwest, you get a little bit of hardwood, but you're also going to get imports from other states, you know, and we have this a lot in California and other states where there isn't a great hardwood forest, but they're bringing forest land in from other, and forest products, lumber from other states. How does it, if you cross multiple regions, if you're in California and you're dealing with wood coming out of a concerned zone or something like that?
Yeah, so I would definitely talk to your regional wood innovations coordinator. There can be some strategizing there. You know, so some regions don't receive as many applications as other regions do. And so, but you really need to consider where the biggest impact is going to occur, whether to the forest system or to the community. And so, you know, there is some strategizing there to decide, you know, how it would look best in the grant application, you know, what would be the biggest impact and how you could express that, you know, based upon the region where you submit your application from.
But are you allowed to cross regions? Because I remember doing my grant with Larry Swan and Julie Keys. And I think actually the funding all came from Julie. But Larry was on the committee and being in the loop and all that stuff. So how does that work with multiple regions?
I would say, you know, it works pretty good. You know, the regional coordinators talk to each other. You know, you can only submit one application per project, and you can't submit to multiple regions, but you can submit multiple proposals per year on different topics. You can submit to the wood innovations and the community wood program simultaneously, but you know, I really haven't seen any issues with businesses crossing over into different regions. You know, I know there's a nonprofit in Michigan right now that received a grant to do work in Region 2 this year. And so it's sort of, you know, where the project is going to have the impact and, you know, where the work is being focused.
I have a request for you to show your slides again. Slide 2, and then I think it's slide 6.
Can do.
Slide 2 was the initial investment slide showing the two scenarios right here, wood innovations and community wood grant. The question was it just for nonprofit? I think that's answered in slide 6 right there, where it says for nonprofits at the top, but if you look down, it says companies, corporations, for profit there on the right hand side. So both systems can have businesses, companies, corporations, for-profit entities applied to them.
Correct. Yep. So, and this information will be in grants.gov, and it will also be on our Wood Innovations website. And so, you know, definitely check that website and monitor it in case anything changes from what I present here and what happens in the next federal fiscal year.
Thanks, Patrick. I think that's really helpful. I hope everybody else has gotten some good information out of this and a chance to discuss it. We really do appreciate the Forest Service engaging with the hardwood industry and sharing this information about the grants. I know that we have a great potential of projects. We have an industry that needs to have and take on a lot more of innovation as we go forward. And we're going to look to continue to use grants throughout the years and continue to work with our allied associations and others to get grants both within the NHLA and support members getting grants through technical services and other stuff like that. So very helpful. We really appreciate your time, Patrick. I've gotten lots of good comments. We had about 72 attendees here on the webinar. So a lot of people got exposure to all this, and hopefully it was helpful to anybody. We will email out the slides as a PDF. Patrick has already submitted to us, so we'll share that with the members. We have a recording of it as well. And if there is any follow-up, you can reach out to myself or to Patrick. We are looking forward to continually having conversations with the Forest Service and helping anybody. So if you're interested in this, please reach out to your regional representative, talk to us here at the NHLA so we can help coordinate any letters of support, both from the industry as well as with other community leaders, other regional associations, interested parties, impacted people. There are a lot of opportunities here for all of us to continue to advance the story and the wood innovation opportunities here within the hardwood industry, and we really need to take advantage of this. So thank you so much, Patrick. I appreciate it. Nobody else can clap, but I'll do it for you, and appreciate your time and taking this effort for us.
Thank you. And, we do solicit input from associations like the NHLA, on the process we have, if there's a certain topic we're missing, if there's a certain species that you think we should prioritize, let us know. I mean, we have good open communications for this program and like to see it going, and, keeping this program going depends upon industry and, partnerships like this. So.
Yeah, it does. And it really, again, it's a story. Like everybody who wants to apply for one of these grants, they have to work hard to tell the whole story and share it. But it is a good story as you pull it all together, from forest health and business and for profit and community, social, environmental justice. It all fits into this area. We have a lot of members in rural communities that are there and are the life stream of those communities. And I think you said the best when you said, hey, if it's keeping 200 jobs and keeping a plant manufacturing, that's a story. That's part of this. Even if it is, hey, yes, you're no longer pulling off the chain, but we all had those days of pulling off the green chain, and we know how heavy those boards can be and how hard it is to get people to want to do that. And those are the types of innovations we need to have those people now, learning how to operate a sorting bin and making sure the equipment is working functionally and doing other functional jobs. And so it really does tie back in. And I hope all the members do take advantage of this for stationary wood equipment on all sorts of things and engage with you on this one. So thank you very much, Patrick. Have a good day, and we look forward to talking with you again in the future.
Thank you.
And we'll see you at the next NHLA convention.
For sure.
In Kentucky. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.